Hi, everybody. I'm Dvorah Governale,
I'm Keri Parker.
and we are back. We are here to talk to you about some more fantastic storytelling from one of our favorite genres, film. And today, the topic that we're going to focus on is Thunderbolts, or as we now know, the new Avengers. Thunderbolts, let's be real, that's just more fun. And
Hmm.
we'll never know whether it's an electronics or a tire salesman who actually supported them.
Yes.
But that can go on for forever. But Thunderbolts, that is the cool name.
It should change every time they talk about it too. It should never be the same. It should always change and rotate just for fun.
Well, and Ghost had it right because she basically just took the two and just blended them together and was like, whatever, guys, let's move on.
Yes.
But yeah, so Thunderbolts came out spring of 2025. One of the newest installments in the MCU. I personally have just been a ginormous fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe since it's been coming out. I thought it was actually kind of perfect to start out with the Thunderbolts group of characters because it is a group of characters that we've already been able to see them so many times throughout different films and TV shows. So we already had great character development that we've been able to lay that foundation on. And it also is a comic that's been around for a while. So we're getting close to 30 years since the first time they appeared in the comics. It was with the intention to fill the Avengers gap, which kind of is perfect for where we're at in the MCU. So that kind of aligned pretty perfectly with their first comic appearance. Like how we had the twist reveal of their name, that they're actually the new Avengers at the end of the film. In the comics, the twist reveal of their name was actually Masters of Evil. But as they continue to have more issues come out, these characters do start to see the value in being a hero and find that it is more emotionally fulfilling. And they do become a much better group of anti-heroes like we see in the film. And eventually they get the title the Dark Avengers. So I'm so glad that they took
Ooh,
that was what they were called in the comics. As they
that's
can
kind of hot. That's all broody and mysterious. That's adorable.
be honest, again, costume designer here. I really love that you take this group of characters. You've got U.S. Agent, who is supposed to be your what do they call him? The dime store Captain America. So he's got the red, white, and blue, but his blue is about as dark as navy can get before you call it black.
The
Um,
Timu Captain America would be the modern reference.
yeah, exactly. You know, you've got Ghost, who essentially has gone from a slick silver bodysuit, and now she's in like armor. Um,
Hmm.
so each one of their costumes is a much darker version, actually, of kind of the non-anti-hero version of who they're from, minus Yelena, because she's a Black Widow, and black is just the darkest color you can get. So
Yeah.
but yes. And then, of course, we've got the character, you know, if you've got a group of anti heroes, who are they fighting against? In this case, it's, you know, a little bit each other. It's a lot bit Valentina, who's kind of their boss. But there's, of course, our big main character is Bob. He also appeared in the comics about 25 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was 2000 was the year that he showed up in the comics. Um, and I really appreciate because he was a character who was dealing with mental health challenges. And as a result, while he did have, it's referred to as the power of a million exploding suns. That's how powerful he is. That's how he's described in the comics. But because he's also navigating these mental health challenges, he winds up having this dark side to him, and that is called the Void, which is just such a perfect, poignant name. It describes everything you need verbally, and it gives you a perfect visual image. So I thought that that was a really great kind of the call to arms. Let's get back into getting MCU where the fans have loved it all this time. Because if you've got a group of anti-heroes, who are they going to fight? You know, they kind of took the format that was pretty common over the last decade and a half, which was to have the superhero and then the supervillain, and they've got fairly similar powers, so that when they fight, it's who's going to win. In this instance, you had that within one being, so you had one man who was very good. You know, you've got the visual of the gold. You know, they dye his hair, his costume's gold, his little S is brilliant metallic gold. everything that symbolizes being golden, being light or like a flame. But then the opposite of what's going on inside of him is so black that you barely get any contrast. I really love the artwork they did with him. Once in a blue moon, maybe you'll see like just a little shadow and you can tell his jaw is moving or something in his hair. But overall, what they did with Void is they made him so black. There's almost no contour, almost no contrast. So he truly does feel like a void. So I have the installment as well as a focus on mental health. And we're going to throw that over to you, Miss Keri, because
I was going to say, girl, I'm about to burst because you've said so many things. So just to make sure we touch on them, the idea of he is their antithesis, right? I feel like what we always see, and this is actually a great theme to bring up with everything that you just mentioned, so first off, the pigment spectrums, right? So black is the darkest color. Bringing it back to that, the idea that ironically in light, it's the opposite concept, right? Where black in pigment is all of the colors and white is the absence, right? Then in light, white is all of the colors and black is the absence
of light.
Of light, and that's the irony is that because the idea that they had to come together almost like colors and turn into the white light that was against the void, and the way they represented the void visually with imagery with the black so dark that the contrast is barely there to see the outline of his nose and his adorable little Pullman face. Right? The Pullmans, like adorable. So weird that I had a crush on his dad and while we were sleeping, but it's fine. Everything's fine. Right? So the reality that you're absolutely right. His color was gold, but so many of those contrasts, and I think that every movie it's about the yin yang dichotomy, right? So the heroes have to be an equal opposite to the villain. Otherwise, it's just kind of slaughter. It's not right. It's not a story worth telling. And so even more to bring it back to things we've talked about, the idea of the hero's journey, they seek redemption. And so the reality that these anti-heroes, these misfits as they were, and how we met them in all those other stories, which is so very comic book narrative-esque and storytelling-esque. The point is that we see them as these misfits, and they're almost villains in most of the other stories where we meet them. And then they are now achieving redemption in the very Joseph Campbell way of that fulfillment, because that idea of they achieved redemption and that was the fulfillment moment, right? That is the climax. And then that's where that chapter of the story ends and another story begins. Partly why we love comic books and the format, because we can be episodic. But I think this one they did great. Introducing, like you said, the Thunderbolts who have existed and kind of how it aligned with that idea of we feel like we need a hero, right? That story of we need to feel like the little guys have a fight. And in this one, the little guys were the misfits. They were the anti-heroes. They were the people just kind of like scattered about in all of these stories of the superheroes.
Well, it's like you said, they just have already been pitted against people who have similar abilities and powers as them. And, like you were talking about, that need for a hero. Yelena, we start out in this film, Yelena, she's literally on top of a building. It looks like she's jumping off. She's in the middle of a mission, as we very soon see, but we're hearing kind of that head talk, that whole intro where she's just talking about, basically what she's describing is depression, but she's talking about that feeling of, uselessness and purposelessness and being alone. And She honestly uses a lot of verbiage that can be extremely relatable, even though we may not all have the skill sets that Yelena has, of the whole, I just go into work every day, I just clock in, I do my job, I go home, I drink alcohol, I scroll on my phone, and I go to sleep, and then I wake up the next day and I do it all over again. They give us something that's very relatable. And so she winds up going to her father or her father figure and saying, "This is how I'm feeling. What do I do with that? I see that you've been through something similar. So what do I do with that?" And that actually is exactly what he suggests to her is he says, "You need to be a hero." Like, I felt at my height when I was out there serving other people. And so she even calls Valentina and says, "Hey, after this mission, can I please have something that is, more service oriented and more positive and me putting good into the world?" And one of the things that I love so much about Red Guardian's character in this film, oh my goodness, he's so brilliant. I love him in Black Widow and I love him in this film. He's so funny, and I think he just is a really good. He gives us good imagery of, that guy who's trying to do a good job, but he also has like his self motivation as well, and he's just trying to find the balance and all of that. But he is our main character that actually keeps coming back to that theme of light. He tells her that every time Yelena walks into a room, it brightens the room. Um, Multiple lines that he gives about the importance of light. He says that this team has the makings to be a light in the darkness. So I love that in this film, where our bad guy at the end is the Void, Red Guardian is continually trying to give Yelena that inspiration of, you are the light and you can be that light in the darkness. And even when she says, "I don't remember that, I don't remember feeling that," and he says, "That's okay, that's all right, because that's why we're here for each other, so that even if you don't see it, even if you don't remember it, I do, and we can be there to support each other." So
Right.
yeah, it's just, I do love that, and I love that Yelena really does she gives us a lot of great lines. We'll focus a bit on healthy approaches to processing emotions. She does talk to Bob and does the whole, "What do you do when you're feeling the emptiness? What do you do when you're feeling alone?" You just shove that way down deep. And of course, she is saying that as a joke, but also you can tell she's kind of also telling him that's what she's been doing. And it's clear it's not working.
Right.
They don't have a lot of time to dwell on it in that moment. They got to get out of the cave and get away from the bad guys and get to freedom and safety. And they, of course, address it once they get back. They come full circle as they get back to the end of the film. But yeah, just that repeated message of being nothing, being worthless, feeling alone, and that just should be what you accept, and that's just what is. And Red Guardian just keeps bringing it back to, no, it's not about being alone. No, you are not worthless. No, it is not about feeling empty. You are a light. We need to work together. We can make things better. We can be heroes, even though we're misfits and anti-heroes.
Because the irony is that she asked Valentina to be more in front of the people, which, as you were speaking on it, I'm literally thinking she wants to connect to other humans more. She doesn't want to be the lone assassin out on the assignment working by herself. She wants to be able to see the people that her work is supposedly benefiting so she can feel that validation, right? Because that's what external validation is. It's why we are pack creatures. We need a little bit of proof of acceptance from our pack in order to be okay with ourselves, which is what keeps us from going completely alone and isolating, is the fact that she, even in that moment, is problem solving and saying, I can't do this anymore, because that's the closest she can get to admitting those emotions she's been shoving down, telling Bob to shove down. Is she can't say, I'm depressed. She can't say, I don't like being alone anymore. Not to Valentina. That's why she went to Dad to say it, but she still, even then, is struggling with saying it to him. She's more like, how do you do it? As if it's something that is possible to just keep doing. And he's like, you don't. Like, that's not that's not what I'm doing. That's not what any, like, it's always about other people, you know, because even in his little job in his unfortunate apartment, right, it was about like serving other people. Like he knew it, he understood that, but that's why he likes the attention. That's why he's on the Wheaties box and he's like, me, yeah, adorable. And
A poor grocery store customer. My Wheaties box? You
my
want this? All the
and then
vitamins?
she like politely puts it down at the end of the aisle. That's 100% the safest, healthiest way to get out of that situation. I was so proud of her. He's wholesome and he's trying and he's empathetic and he might not be perfect, but he's trying, you know, because any progress is progress, even if it's not fully their progress. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I totally agree. I do love that. You actually really get some beautiful imagery of that because, yeah, basically as a result of their conversation, Red Guardian decides he's going to go be proactive and get a job. And it's how he's able to get that bit of information that Yelena's in danger. He's, of course, woefully behind the 8 ball in delivering his warning, don't go down in the cave. And they've already, been down and back up again. But you do see with all of these characters, and especially Red Guardian, Yelena, and Bob, you see that they're all on their own stage in their journey. And you've got Red Guardian, who's kind of been through it already. He, like you said, older generation. He's got a little more, words of experience and advice that he's able to give. You've got Yelena, who's at her stage in her journey. And even where she's at, where it is still a place of suffering and a lot of questions and confusion and figuring things out, she encounters Bob. And I love that, honestly, our intro to Bob is that we can kind of see he's a guy that comes from a past of, abuse and depression, as well as addiction. And when we see him, he is literally in the trash. Like, it is no wonder that he has no value for himself because he's literally in a trash pile. He has been sent down to this place for the trash to be burned. And, I guess in their defense, they thought he was dead, but still, he essentially like climbs out of the trash heap. And that's his character intro. So as he's asking Yelena, like, what do I do with this emptiness? There's then that next level down where they're all still working. And then I love as we get to the end of the film, you really get to see that in these 3 different stages of the journey, they are aligning where they are, and each person is able to help the other. That very final battle moment where each member of the Thunderbolts is essentially trapped by some type of a barricade in that darkest, scariest room that they're all in trying to fight the void. And they do all want to come together to help each other. But I also love that imagery that they've got some physical barrier. And that's really how it can be for a lot of us, that we may have some type of physical and or emotional challenge that we're trying to overcome. And as we're able to work on that, then we are able to help be there for other people. And that really is, the balance that we are constantly working to strike in our world and with the people who are a part of our world is, acknowledging and giving grace to the other person for where they're at in their journey. We are rarely going to be in the same place on our journeys together, but that's all right. That's not the point. The point is to be able to do what we can for the people that we care about, for the people who are near us, wherever they're at on their journey. And it's going to help us. She says that. She's like, I know that it can get better. And he's like, how do you know that? And she says, I know, because just this little bit of effort right here made it a little bit lighter. The emptiness isn't gone, but it is better. Like, I can acknowledge that things have improved. And if we keep on this trajectory, it's just going to keep getting better and better. And, I listened to this really great video. I apologize, I'm blanking on this incredible therapist's name. But she talked about that. She said, healthy boundaries are important, and it's good to have healthy boundaries and protect yourself where you need to. But also, we can get into a place of society where we get so boundary oriented, we do all just become so alone. So that imagery that we get from this film, I think showcases that so perfectly, that yes, healthy boundaries are good, but we need to put ourselves out there and be there for one another, even if it's not to fix the problem, but just get a little lighter, just to make it just a little better. So yeah, I love this approach to, this resurgence of MCU awesomeness, and the focus on mental health and the imagery that it gives us of how we can be there more and better for each other.
Mm-hmm. So the reason I was smiling so hard when you said when we see him, he's literally in the trash and how he has the background of some mental health and addiction struggles. And I'm literally smiling so hard because I love you. And I'm just thinking, I love you. I love you. I'm not going to cry. This is absolutely fine right now, right? Because I'm so glad you're the person who described that, not me, because it's so very true. And it's become more painfully true as I've worked more in the mental health field. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Learning about the reality, right? About different backgrounds, different lives, different multicultural existences, essentially, but the reality of how many different layers to the onion, as Shrek says, that we are, right? Like what makes us is so, it's almost exponential in the intricacy because it's about literally where you're born. I mean, your geographical location, your generation you're born to, because there are cultures,
Yeah.
right? Like cultures upon cultures till like you're turducken in cultures. And it's like, cool, I don't know how to be a person out here. But to be fair, most of us are still trying to figure out. And as technology and other things, again, generational concepts, socioeconomic concepts contribute to our experience in the world too, right? So what expensive looks to me versus what expensive looks to someone else versus what safe looks to one person versus safe looks to another person can be completely wildly different. And so ultimately your identification of his lack of self-worth is it was just like, I'm so glad you said it because I would have just, I would have cracked. That would have been the moment, but it's fine. But ultimately, it is such a relatable concept right now, and so many people are feeling it. But I think that's why this movie is so essential and crucial in this time is the understanding of it's not you. It's it's everything right now. Everything is weird. Everything is awkward. Nothing really makes sense. And no one knows where we're going, but we're all here together. Like we're literally trying to make the best out of the weirdest Disney ride that we all feel trapped on a little boat and there are all these things going on around us and we're like, cool, right? This is fine.
It's fine.
Right. They manifested that sensation in the Marvel universe. And yeah, they spat it out into our adorable little Bob who pops out from behind the trash and is just like, hi. Like, cool. He's ready for the assignment, whatever it is. He's no questions asked, no judgment. But so he's so adorable and he's so wholesome and he's so pure.
That is what good filmmaking is, and that is what good storytelling is, because in all reality, even though, yeah, maybe it's not training us to have the longevity and the grit that we need to have, but it does put us through the full emotional cycle in a soundbite that we can actually consume. This is not ancient Greece. We can't sit and watch a 12-hour play anymore unless you count
Girl.
some big thing, whatever series that you're into. We do that. But, in general, we really just have time for that couple hours, 90 minutes, And so we need to be able to get the character intro. We need to be able to have the plot laid out fairly quickly. We need to see, the different adventures that this person chooses to go through and the different mishaps that come upon them. We need to see it almost all fall apart and then come back together at the end so we can go through the full cycle. And that doesn't mean that we don't go through that cycle in our own lives. We all have our own stories. We're living our own stories. But like you said, it takes place over, months or years or sometimes decades, depending on the part of your story that you're talking about. And we need something to remind us that there is an overall cycle, there is an overall arc.
Mhm.
And feel that it can help us to be motivated to face whatever chapter of our story that we're living through. So that's another reason I love films. There's actually studies that have shown that people who watch more films actually have higher levels of empathy because they've gone through that storytelling cycle more frequently, and so they can understand, like, let me have perspective, let me have patience, let me think that maybe I don't know what you're going through, or like all of the things that come from going through that storytelling cycle multiple times. It helps our psyche and it helps us to get through our own story, and it helps us to be better participants in the stories of the people around us. Well, thank you so much for joining us as we geek out about our favorite stories that we are so glad are being told. Again, I am definitely a big geek of the MCU. Loved comic characters my whole life. I've been really loving what the film industry has been doing with them for the last 3 decades. So this installment of Thunderbolts, I've just really appreciated that there was a lot of familiar flavors in there, but we also had this nice fresh focus on the importance of mental health, the importance of being there for each other. And as Yelena says, just, for us to remember that the biggest lie that we can be told is that we are alone, because we are not. We are there for each other. We can be there for each other. Let's be there for each other. And I hope that we can continue to have stories like this inspire us to do that in our little stories, our little worlds, and the people who are a part of them. Like you, Keri Parker.
I
Yay!
love you, girl. I'm so glad that we get to do this and that my best friend loves these things as much as I do. So, yes, we will definitely be having more conversations. If you have thoughts on which one of the MCU movies you feel was the most like mental health, stability, relatable moment that helped you through something, comment, let us know. I'd love to have those conversations and get that feedback, and then that'll give us stuff that will definitely be willing to touch on and bring some of the stuff that you guys give us to the table.
Absolutely. Thank you again. We'll see you next time. Bye.